Okay, so the day I discovered my husband had emptied our savings, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I smiled because James had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd forgotten that I wasn't just his wife. I was the financial advisor who'd helped 3 different women rebuild their lives after their ex-husbands tried the same thing. You didn't need it anyway, he said, his voice casual through my phone speaker, as if he hadn't just admitted to stealing 15 years of my careful planning. Besides, what's done is done. No point getting upset about it now. My name is Rachel, and at 36, I was standing in my corner office at Morrison & Wells investment firm, listening to my husband explain why he'd drained the account that held not just our retirement fund, but our daughter Emma's college savings. The fund I'd built through strategic investments, careful planning, and years of expertise in exactly how money could disappear and how it could be found. How much is left? I kept my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. Left? None of it's left, honey. I had some business debts to clear up. But don't worry, you're good with money. You'll figure something out. Figure something out. Like I had a choice. Like he hadn't just stolen $287,000 while I was at a conference in New York, unable to stop him because we'd kept our joint account from when we first married at 22. My one blind spot in an otherwise meticulous financial life. I see, I said quietly. Well, good luck with that. That's my girl, he replied, mistaking my calm for acceptance. Always practical. Listen, I've got to run. Meeting some investors for drinks. We'll talk soon. Meeting investors. With my money. With our daughter's future. I sat down at my desk, looking at the familiar family photo. James, Emma, and me at her 13th birthday last month. My phone buzzed again with his text. Don't mention this to Emma or your family. No need to worry them. I opened my laptop and began a new document. Not for a list of what he'd stolen. I already knew that down to the penny. This document had a different title. Asset Recovery Plan. Below it, I typed a single line. Day 1. James thinks he's won. Let him. What my husband didn't know was that I'd spent the last decade not just building our savings, but building a network of the exact people you'd need if someone ever tried to make your money disappear. And tomorrow, I would start making those calls. Over the next 48 hours, I did what I'd advised countless clients to do. Nothing obvious. Let him think the shock had paralyzed me. Let him believe his manipulation had worked. Meanwhile, I began my real work. Mrs. Anderson? Sarah from the bank's fraud department sounded confused. Your husband just tried to open a new account with a substantial cash deposit. Given your previous instructions, I wanted to alert you immediately. I smiled, remembering the contingency plans I'd quietly put in place 3 years ago, after James's first borrowed money incident. The one he thought I'd forgiven and forgotten. What amount exactly? $75,000 in cash. The first transfer traced. I made a note in my growing digital file while keeping my voice professional. Please proceed exactly as we discussed, Sarah, and thank you. My phone buzzed with another text from James. Hey, beautiful. Thinking of surprising Emma with a trip to Paris this summer. She always wanted to see Europe. With her own college fund, I thought, my fingers tightening around my phone. But I typed back. Sounds wonderful. You're such a thoughtful father. Let him think I was still the trusting wife, the one who'd spent 15 years making excuses for his business ventures and temporary financial setbacks. The one who'd believed him every time he said, just one more investment, honey, this one's guaranteed. I opened my secure email and sent 2 messages. The first to Maria Chen, my forensic accountant friend. Remember that favor you owe me? I need those account traces we discussed. All of them. The second to Judge Caroline Weber. Dinner tomorrow. Need your expert opinion on a delicate matter. You're being awfully quiet about all this, my sister Kate said when she stopped by my office that afternoon. It's not like you to just accept. She stopped, noting the 3 monitors on my desk, each displaying different financial tracking software. Unless I'm being quiet because James isn't the only one who can make money disappear. I turned one screen toward her. He took our savings thinking I'd only look at our local accounts, but 15 years in finance teaches you to follow international transfers. Kate leaned closer, her eyes widening at the transaction trails I'd uncovered. Rachel, these dates. He's been planning this for months. Yes, I replied, pulling up another screen. But here's what he doesn't know. I've been planning for years. My phone lit up with another text from James. Don't bother checking the Swiss accounts. Already moved everything. Always one step ahead, right? I added the text to my evidence file, then opened a final document I'd been saving. Inside was every financial move James had made for the past 5 years, every business meeting that didn't exist, and most importantly, the real reason he needed $287,000 so urgently. It wasn't business debts he was paying off. The email from Maria arrived at 2 a.m. Rachel, you need to see this now. It's not just your accounts he's been touching. I was still awake, of course. Sleep hadn't been a priority since discovering the theft. I opened the attached files and felt my calculated calm finally crack, just for a moment. James hadn't just emptied our savings. He'd been systematically transferring money from his elderly parents' retirement accounts, borrowing against our daughter's trust fund from her grandparents, and this made my hands shake. He'd somehow gained access to my sister Kate's children's college funds. A complete web of financial fraud with our stolen savings as just the latest withdrawal. All to pay off someone named Elena Petrova. My phone lit up with a text from James. Missing you. Conference running long. Might be another week. Conference. Right. The same lie he'd been telling his parents about their missing retirement payments. I checked the tracking software I'd installed during his last business trip. His phone's location, Monte Carlo. I dialed Maria. Tell me, I said when she answered. Elena Petrova, Maria replied, is a real estate developer, or at least that's her official title. She specializes in helping wealthy clients move money internationally through property investments. But here's the interesting part. 3 months ago, she purchased a villa in Monaco. Guess whose name is on the deed as co-owner? I thought of all those late-night business calls, the mysterious trips to Europe, the way James had been pushing to move our assets into international accounts. He's planning to disappear, I said, the pieces clicking into place. The savings account was just the last piece he needed. There's more, Maria continued. The villa purchase? It required proof of funds 3 months before the sale, which means he's been promising money he didn't have, I finished. Money he only got his hands on 3 days ago. Our money. I pulled up the international banking alerts I'd set up years ago. Another paranoid precaution James had mocked. 2 new notifications. Transfer attempt. $287,000 USD to account. Holder, Elena Petrova status, frozen. Urgent. Account holder, James Anderson, attempting multiple transfers status, all pending review. My phone buzzed again. James. Hey, honey, weird question. You haven't changed any of our banking passwords recently, have you? Getting some strange errors. I smiled, thinking of the faces he'd soon be making at various ATMs and bank counters across Europe. But my satisfaction was short-lived as I opened Maria's next document. Rachel, she'd written, I found something else. Those business debts he claimed to be paying off? They're real, but they're not to banks or investors. He owes money to people who don't send late notices. They send something much worse. A final attachment showed a series of threatening messages, each mentioning specific details about Emma's daily schedule. James hadn't just stolen our money. He'd put our daughter in danger. If you're enjoying this story so far, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. It costs you nothing, but for me, especially in these early days, it means the world. Let's continue with what happens next. I didn't call the police. Not yet. In my line of work, I'd seen how quickly abusers and fraudsters could spin stories of domestic misunderstandings when law enforcement got involved too soon. Instead, I made 3 different calls. Miss Chen speaking. Maria, I need everything you have on Elena Petrova's known associates, especially anyone with a history of making good on their threats. While Maria worked, I dialed Judge Weber's private number. Caroline answered on the first ring. Rachel? It's 3 a.m. I'm invoking Protocol 7, our code for clients in immediate danger. I need an emergency hearing. First slot available, complete media blackout, sealed records. A sharp intake of breath. The last time you invoked Protocol 7 was for Jessica Torres. Her ex-husband had similar friends to James's new associates. Jessica, whose children now live safely under new identities, thanks to Caroline's swift action. I'll have the paperwork ready by 8 a.m. But Rachel? A pause. You'll need proof of imminent threat. Check your encrypted email. My third call was to Kate. I need you to take Emma. Now. 10 minutes later, I watched from my office window as Kate's car pulled up to the back entrance. My daughter, still in her pajamas, clutched her backpack, looking confused but not afraid. Not yet. I'd told her it was a surprise sleepover with her cousins. My phone buzzed. James again. Sweetheart, random thought. Maybe Emma should come visit me in Europe for a bit? Good father-daughter bonding time. I thought of the threatening messages, the detailed observations of Emma's schedule. Had James been helping them track her movements? Or was he just too desperate to see the danger he'd placed her in? Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Anderson's payment deadline has passed. Perhaps his daughter would like to discuss terms? I added both messages to my evidence file, then opened a program I developed after the Jessica Torres case. On my screen, dozens of financial algorithms sprang to life, each designed to do one thing: make money not just disappear, but reappear exactly where I wanted it. No. James thought he'd inherited his parents' financial savvy. In reality, they'd consulted me for years. Every account he'd stolen from had a hidden backstop, one that would activate the moment I entered a specific code. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as a final text came through from James. The money transfer to Elena still won't go through. Need you to check our accounts ASAP. I smiled and began to type. Time to show my husband exactly why his wealthy clients had always insisted on meeting with me first. By 6 a.m., Elena Petrova's carefully constructed financial empire was beginning to crumble. She just didn't know it yet. Confirmation received, Maria texted. All 7 shell companies flagged for emergency audit. Monaco banking authorities notified. I watched the alerts flood my monitoring system. Elena's accounts freezing one by one, each tagged with the international banking codes I'd spent years learning to manipulate. The woman who'd helped my husband plan his escape was about to discover the difference between moving money illegally and making it legally disappear. My phone rang. James. Honey, something's wrong with the accounts. His voice had lost its casual confidence. I can't access anything. Oh? I kept my tone concerned, helpful. That's strange. Want me to look into it? Yes, please. It's just, there are some urgent transfers that need to go through. I pulled up his current location data. Still Monte Carlo, but now at a small cafe near Elena's office. Probably having a panic meeting about their frozen funds. Of course, I'll check right now. I paused, then added, by the way, how's that conference going? A slight hesitation. Good, very productive. In Monte Carlo, dead silence. Rachel. Don't worry, James, I'm being very productive too. I hung up and turned to my second monitor, where Elena's business history was laid bare. Luxury properties purchased with laundered money. Tax evasion schemes masked as real estate investments. And most importantly, evidence that she'd known exactly whose money James was stealing. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mrs. Anderson, this is Elena Petrova. We should talk. Finally, I texted back. Check your primary account balance first. 3 minutes later, what did you do? Nothing compared to what comes next. My office, 3 p.m. your time, video call. I opened the file Maria had compiled on Elena's past clients. 3 had lost everything when their wives discovered their plans. 2 were now in prison. But Elena had always managed to keep her hands clean, her own assets untouched. Until now, James called again. Rachel, Elena says you've frozen her accounts. You need to undo whatever you did. These are dangerous people. Like the ones tracking our daughter's schedule? Another dead silence. How did you... 15 years of marriage, James, and you never once asked what I actually do at work. Never wondered why your wealthy friends insisted on meeting with me before investing with you. Never questioned why I always seemed to know when you were lying about money. Rachel, listen. No, you listen. In exactly 1 hour, Elena's entire network of shell companies will be flagged for criminal investigation. In 2 hours, your parents and Kate will learn where their missing money went. In 3 hours, I meet with Judge Weber to ensure you can't come within 100 feet of Emma. You can't. I already have. My office door opened. Caroline Weber walked in, holding a stack of documents. Right on schedule. I'll call you back, James. My lawyer's here with the restraining orders. Oh, and if Elena's associates are thinking of visiting Emma at her sleepover? I smiled. They might want to ask why their offshore accounts are suddenly empty, too. By 6 a.m., Elena Petrova's carefully constructed financial empire was beginning to crumble. She just didn't know it yet. Confirmation received, Maria texted. All 7 shell companies flagged for emergency audit. Monaco banking authorities notified. I watched the alerts flood my monitoring system. Elena's accounts freezing one by one, each tagged with the international banking codes I'd spent years learning to manipulate. The woman who'd helped my husband plan his escape was about to discover the difference between moving money illegally and making it legally disappear. My phone rang. James. Honey, something's wrong with the accounts. His voice had lost its casual confidence. I can't access anything. Oh? I kept my tone concerned. Helpful. That's strange. Want me to look into it? Yes, please. It's just, there are some urgent transfers that need to go through. I pulled up his current location data. Still Monte Carlo, but now at a small cafe near Elena's office. Probably having a panic meeting about their frozen funds. Of course, I'll check right now. I paused, then added, by the way, how's that conference going? A slight hesitation. Good, very productive. In Monte Carlo, dead silence. Rachel. Don't worry, James, I'm being very productive too. I hung up and turned to my second monitor, where Elena's business history was laid bare. Luxury properties purchased with laundered money. Tax evasion schemes masked as real estate investments. And most importantly, evidence that she'd known exactly whose money James was stealing. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mrs. Anderson, this is Elena Petrova. We should talk. Finally, I texted back, check your primary account balance first. 3 minutes later, what did you do? Nothing compared to what comes next. My office, 3 p.m. your time, video call. I opened the file Maria had compiled on Elena's past clients. 3 had lost everything when their wives discovered their plans. 2 were now in prison, but Elena had always managed to keep her hands clean, her own assets untouched. Until now. James called again. Rachel, Elena says you've frozen her accounts. You need to undo whatever you did. These are dangerous people. Like the ones tracking our daughter's schedule? Another dead silence. How did you... 15 years of marriage, James, and you never once asked what I actually do at work. Never wondered why your wealthy friends insisted on meeting with me before investing with you. Never questioned why I always seemed to know when you were lying about money. Rachel, listen. No, you listen. In exactly 1 hour, Elena's entire network of shell companies will be flagged for criminal investigation. In 2 hours, your parents and Kate will learn where their missing money went. In 3 hours, I meet with Judge Weber to ensure you can't come within 100 feet of Emma. You can't. I already have. My office door opened. Caroline Weber walked in, holding a stack of documents. Right on schedule. I'll call you back, James. My lawyer's here with the restraining orders. Oh, and if Elena's associates are thinking of visiting Emma at her sleepover? I smiled. They might want to ask why their offshore accounts are suddenly empty, too. Signal sent, I texted Maria, then watched through the video feed as Elena's office door burst open. The look of shock on her face as Interpol agents entered was almost worth the money James had stolen. Almost. Mrs. Petrova, the lead agent began. You're under investigation for international financial fraud. Elena lunged for her laptop, but I'd already disconnected the call. No need to watch what came next. I had other priorities. Rachel. Judge Weber handed me a stack of freshly signed documents. The emergency orders are through. James can't access any accounts connected to you or Emma, and the restraining order is effective immediately. My phone buzzed with a series of rapid notifications. James, what have you done? James, they're arresting her. James, Rachel, please. James, I can explain everything. Unknown number? Mrs. Anderson, this is Detective Laurent with Interpol. We'll need your complete files on the Petrova case. James, they're taking my passport. I forwarded the threatening messages about Emma to Detective Laurent, then turned to my computer. Time to help the other families Elena and James had targeted. Maria's face appeared on my screen. Rachel, you won't believe what we found in Elena's files. James wasn't just helping her steal from you. There are at least 15 other families. Send me their contact information, I interrupted. And Maria? Alert their banks. Same protocol we used for Jessica Torres. Already done. But Rachel, Maria paused. James's parents are here. They're asking how much they've lost. I thought of my in-laws, how they'd welcomed me into their family, trusted their son with their retirement, their future. Put them in the conference room. I'll tell them myself. My phone lit up again. Kate, you need to see this. Emma's asking questions. James tried to call her. I felt the first crack in my professional calm. He'd dared to call our daughter? After everything he'd done? Don't let her answer, I texted back. I'm on my way. A final message from James. You've ruined everything. Is that what you wanted? I thought of the other families he'd helped Elena destroy, the casual way he'd put our daughter at risk, how he'd assumed I'd just accept his theft like all the others had. No, James, I typed. I wanted something else entirely. I attached a single file, the complete record of his crimes I'd been building for years, now safely in Interpol's hands. I wanted justice. My office door opened again. Mrs. Anderson? A young intern looked nervous. There are some people here from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They say it's about Operation Petrova. I straightened my jacket and stood. The day wasn't over yet. There were still accounts to freeze, families to protect, and a very important conversation to have with my daughter. And James? He was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous person isn't the one making threats. It's the one who's been quietly taking notes. The hardest conversations are the ones you have to have with your children. I found Emma in Kate's living room, clutching her phone, looking so much older than 13. Dad's on the news, she said without looking up. They're saying he helped steal people's money. I sat beside her, noticing how she'd arranged her homework with the same precise organization I used for case files. My daughter, who'd inherited my need for order and chaos. So, is that why you made me pack my favorite things last night? She asked. Because you knew? I knew I needed to keep you safe, I replied carefully. The money, that was part of it. But there were people working with Dad who might have tried to hurt you. She nodded, analytical even in her pain. Like they hurt the other families? My breath caught. What do you know about the other families? I Googled Elena Petrova. Emma finally looked up. Found articles about wives whose husbands took their money. The kids had to leave their schools, their homes. She paused. Was Dad going to do that to us? Before I could answer, my phone lit up with a video call from Maria. I almost declined, but Emma needed to see this too. Rachel. Maria's face was triumphant. The recovery program worked. We've traced about 60% of the stolen funds from all families affected. The banks are cooperating to restore the accounts. Emma leaned into the frame. What about Grandma and Grandpa's retirement? Maria's expression softened. Already secured, sweetheart. Your mom built in protections years ago. She's been helping other families do the same thing. After the call ended, Emma was quiet for a long moment. Is that what you really do at work? Help people get their money back? Sometimes, I said. Sometimes I help them protect it in the first place. From people like Dad? From anyone who tries to take what isn't theirs. My phone buzzed again. Another desperate text from James. They're saying 20 years, Rachel. Help me and I'll make sure you and Emma get everything back. Emma, reading over my shoulder, laughed bitterly. He still thinks you need his help? Your father never really understood what I do, I said, pulling up my laptop. Want to see? For the next hour, I showed her the legitimate side of my work, how I helped families protect their assets, how I'd built security systems for people's financial futures. She asked sharp questions, her mind working like mine. Mom, she said finally, I want to learn how to do this. Not just protect money, but help people like those other families. My phone lit up one last time. Detective Laurent. Mrs. Anderson, we've found something else in Elena's files. It appears your husband was planning this even before your marriage. There are documents dating back 15 years. I looked at my daughter, seeing my own strength reflected in her eyes. Want to help me with one more thing? There are some families I need to call, and I think they'd appreciate hearing from someone who understands exactly what their kids are going through. Emma straightened, professional mask sliding into place just like mine. Where do we start? The next morning, I sat in my office with a cup of coffee, staring at the aftermath of my decisions. James was gone, his accounts frozen, his lies exposed. Elena Petrova was facing criminal charges, and her network was unraveling faster than even I anticipated. Yet instead of feeling triumphant, I felt quiet. Not empty, not angry, just quiet. Mrs. Anderson? My assistant Claire poked her head in. Her eyes flicked nervously to the stack of documents on my desk. The journalist from Financial Herald is here for your interview. Should I send her in? I hesitated. My first instinct was to decline, to avoid the spotlight and keep working in silence, just as I always had. But then I thought about Emma, sitting at Kate's kitchen table last night, asking me how I do what I do. Yes, I said finally. Send her in. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s, wasted no time getting to the point. You've been called a hero by the families you've helped. What's it like to know that your actions might change how financial fraud cases are handled worldwide? Hero. That word felt too big, too heavy. I wasn't a hero. I was just a mother who refused to let her daughter grow up in fear. It's not about being a hero, I said, leaning back in my chair. It's about accountability. Systems are only as strong as the people protecting them. My goal has always been to make sure that when someone tries to take what isn't theirs, there's nowhere for them to hide. Her pen scratched furiously against her notepad. And your ex-husband? Do you have anything to say to him? I paused, the image of James's panicked texts flashing through my mind. For a brief moment, I thought of the man I married at 22, the man who promised me a life of adventure and trust. That man was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I'd say thank you, I said, surprising even myself, because he reminded me that no one, not even someone you love, should have unchecked access to your life or your resources. He taught me to protect what matters most. Later that afternoon, I found myself back at Kate's house. Emma was in the backyard, practicing a speech she'd written for her school's leadership program. Watching her, I felt a swell of pride so strong it almost hurt. She's really taking after you, you know, Kate said, handing me a cup of tea. That speech she's writing? It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. I smiled, watching Emma gesture emphatically to an imaginary audience. She's stronger than I ever was at her age. Kate's expression softened. Because she has you. Before I could reply, Emma came bounding into the room, her notebook clutched to her chest. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course, I said, setting my tea aside. Do you think someday I could do what you do? Help people the way you help those families? My chest tightened, a mix of pride and sadness swelling inside me. I think you can do anything you set your mind to, I said. But it's not an easy road, Emma. It means making hard choices. Sometimes it means losing people you care about. She nodded, her face serious. But it also means making the world better, right? I reached out, pulling her into a hug. It does. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a strange new rhythm. The media storm around James and Elena died down, replaced by newer scandals. The families James had targeted began rebuilding their lives, and I worked quietly behind the scenes to ensure they had the support they needed. Emma thrived. Her speech won first place at her school's competition, and she started asking more questions about my work, questions that reminded me of my younger self. As for James, the last I heard, he was facing 20 years in prison. He wrote me a letter once, begging for forgiveness. I read it once, then shredded it. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer. Not yet. And maybe not ever. One evening, as Emma and I were walking home from the park, she looked up at me and said, "Mom, do you think Dad ever loved us?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I stopped walking, crouching down to meet her eyes. I think he loved us in the only way he knew how. But love isn't just about words or feelings, Emma. It's about actions. And sometimes people don't know how to show love in the right way. She nodded slowly, her young mind processing something far too big for her age. But we're okay now, right? We're safe? I hugged her tightly, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. We're more than okay. We're strong. And we're going to keep building something beautiful no matter what. As we walked the rest of the way home, hand in hand, I felt the quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the quiet of loss or betrayal. It was the quiet of peace, of knowing that no matter what came next, we'd face it together. As I tucked Emma into bed that night, her laughter still echoing from the story I'd just told her, I thought about how far we'd come. The betrayal, the loss, the chaos, it all felt like another lifetime. But the lessons, those were here to stay. Life doesn't stop for the brokenhearted. It doesn't pause for you to pick up the pieces. And sometimes, the very people you trusted most will be the ones to hurt you the deepest. But here's the truth I've learned. You are stronger than the storm. You are smarter than the lie. And when someone tries to break you, they only give you the chance to rebuild into something unbreakable. Emma turned to me just before falling asleep. "Mom," she whispered, "I think we're going to be okay." I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We already are." And as I turned off the light, I realized that this wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories, and check out my other inspiring stories. Let's keep inspiring each other, one story at a time.